you think about a product, make sure you make one customer really, really happy. So don't focus like making
Yes.
everybody a little bit happy. Just find this one customer, make them really, really happy, and then kind of worry about the second one, make them really, really happy. And then the third one, eventually, if you make people really, really happy, they're going to bring their friends and so on.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, and is sponsored by Leumi Tech, Hippo Insurance, Turing, Upwest Labs, and Hillel at Stanford. Sales, sales, sales. Welcome Eilon Reshef, co-founder and chief product officer of Gong.io. Eilon is a co-founder and the chief product officer at Gong. Gong is the leading solution provider in the revenue intelligence space, helping revenue teams understand how to help their team members succeed, how to better track deals, and how to understand the voice of the market. Gong is a high-growth SaaS vendor and recently announced a funding round with a $2.2 billion valuation. Prior to Gong, Eilon was a co-founder of Webcollage, a SaaS provider in the marketing infrastructure space, following many years in various roles in the software space. Eilon resides in Tel Aviv, Israel, but used to visit the US often prior to COVID. Eilon Reshef, thank you for joining me all the way from California, Gong.io. I'm so excited to speak to you.
Nice being here. Good morning.
Good morning, good evening. It's a COVID, a global world. It doesn't even matter anymore. What matters is that we're going to talk about your journey. We're going to talk about sales. We're going to talk about product and everything somehow combined towards building really incredible companies, to say the least. There's so much out there about, your journey and Gong.io. But what I'm excited to talk to you about these 20 minutes is a little bit about you and your journey and your love for products, and also a little bit about sales and what you're doing. So Eilon, take me all the way back to Weizmann Institute and to Webcollage and Answers. Tell me about your journey a little bit.
Oh, my journey begins many, many years ago. It was in the previous century. So like many others, started as a young kid. Yeah, that early. So like many others, started as a young kid in just development, had my own small business around developing software. In Israel, as you know, you go to the 3-year military service, I've done that, did a little bit of programming there. I worked in one public company, Magic Software Enterprises, which was the first Israeli software company to go public on the Nasdaq. So that was pretty cool. I then went to a small startup called Zappa at the time. John Scully, ex-chairman of Apple, was our chairman, essentially. 3D Words still do not exist. That was back in last century. Then started my own company in the beginning of this century. So Webcollage did software as a service for content marketing. And after we've sold it in 2013, took a sabbatical and then started Gong with Amit Bendov, my partner here.
Unbelievable. And your journey is I think there's a really interesting intersection here of product and technology, right? Because you're an engineer by profession, but you're gravitated towards both VP product back then in the early 2000s, and now chief product officer. But even now, you were a chief technology officer of Gong. So can you talk to me a little bit about how these two roles play together? Because it's not that common to have a chief product officer also be able to assimilate the role of a chief technology officer.
Yeah, right. It was kind of chance, because you're right. I mean, it's very common that engineers eventually become product managers. It's kind of, to become a product manager, either you have a strong business background or strong engineering background, or sometimes other things, right? So that's a pretty common route. So I kind of moved to New York, spent a few years with a business, became like a real product manager. And my previous company, at some stage, we just replaced the head of, and I stayed pretty close to technology just because it's kind of a hobby for me. And then at some stage, we were replacing a head of engineering. And the CEO came to me and said, would you mind doing this for a few years or whenever? Until we sold the company. I'm like, well, I don't know, but let's do it anyway. So I kind of ended up running. I could manage people. That was like a skill set. Kind of technology engineering, I kind of know because I've been following this. So it's been nice for a few years. And then when we started Gong, I told my partner Amit, I actually want to do product. He was like, so who's going to write the code? I'm like, well, I don't know. We're going to find somebody who's going to write the code. He's like, why don't you start a little bit? So I ended up writing the whole prototype with just one more person on my own, and then it sort of evolved. At some stage, it became this big monster. When I mean monster, it's like startup monster, right? 40 people. And at some stage, we kind of said, hey, this is not what necessarily best at. So let's kind of find somebody who's more professional at managing engineering organizations. And then I just kind of focused on product, which is fun. I love product.
I love how you're just, skimming through this as if it's, overnight. But, we're talking about 6 years of hard work accumulating to a market leader right now in the world of sales, over $300 million raised from Sequoia, Battery, Wing VC. I mean, really, the people that you get to, I'm so incredibly jealous just by, the people you get to work with. And obviously, they're jealous because they get to work with you. But tell me a little bit about, starting out with Amit, and you write on your LinkedIn, you're a wannabe founder for 4 months as you're validating this idea that you might have in the whole sales world. Take me back to that time, 2015. What are those 4 months like?
Yeah, so first of all, I took a whole sabbatical off. I recommend to anybody and everybody, right? If you can take a sabbatical, that's fun time, right? So I was looking at a few opportunities. Some of them were nice, some of them weren't nice. There aren't too many. Like for a whole year, I couldn't even find maybe 3 opportunities I was really excited about. But, starting a new company, there's like an energy to it that cannot be replaced by coming to work for a company. And so I kind of originally met Amit when he was trying to recruit me he ran a company called Sisense. He was going to he looked for a VP of product. I was busy. I was in sabbatical. He looked for somebody in New York, which I left many years ago. So that was like a very short conversation. But when he left Sisense to start, well, it wasn't Gong at the time, right? To start a company, we kind of got back together. And what excited me most was, first of all, the approach. It was just like, I was 100% sure there was a need in the market, even if just one company, Sisense. But the other thing that kind of excited me was, at the time, there were so few sales tools out there. So like 3,000 marketing tools, like 100 sales tools. So it was evident there's a lot of green space. I think we underestimated at the time how big the gap was, but we're still excited. We're going to explore this. We got somewhere to start. So it was like an obvious thing to kind of run for.
So even though it might not have been obvious at that moment, now looking back, what was the gap that you realized that there is in the world of sales?
So the gap is it's kind of fascinating that if you sort of look at every sales organization in the world, what people do is most of the time they communicate with customers, emails, phone conversations, videos, text messages, whatever. And all of this conversation essentially goes to the garbage, right? Nobody can ever find it. It doesn't go. The best place is like take notes, put them in some, system, CRM, Evernote, whatever. So there's literally no way for any company on earth to understand what people are really doing. And it's kind of fascinating. We're talking, it's already 2020 now. We're going to Happy New Year for everybody. And then it's funny. And people still can't look at what people are doing. So this is amazing. Right. It's like, how could it be? And I think that's the big gap. And as we probe deeper, it's just evident the gap is huge. Like you have no idea what people are doing. It's like 101, right?
Right. And so I'm guessing that, if I were to ask you even now what you're doing, even though Gong is already, making a huge dent and has already moved the needle and there's no going back, I'm guessing that, in terms of the vision, you're still just scratching the surface of what's possible once you have, any insight into what's actually happening.
Right. It's scratching the surface, both in terms of like number of salespeople. Like we got maybe 100,000 people, but there's in the world, there's probably tens of millions of people. And then sort of capabilities. Yes, we're helping with coaching, we're helping with pipeline management, but we still didn't even so here's the thing, like every sales conversation, there's action items in the end, and the rep might be saying, I'm going to follow up with an email. We actually know what their email is. And if they don't follow up, we never even remind them. So even we don't even provide some very simplistic advice to the rep, let alone things like onboarding, advanced analytics and advice. This is we're just maybe 10, 20% of where we could be in 2 or 3 years.
So take me back to when you're assuming that there is this gap, selling to sales. I've heard it's not that easy. That people have their own methods. Everybody does it perhaps in a different but similar way. How did you find selling Gong to the very first customers who you wanted to adopt?
First customers is never easy. So I think there's maybe 2 things. One is focus, and people underestimate focus. Everybody says focus, right? So when we started, it was we're only going to sell to software companies, business to business in North America who sell over video conferencing. 2015, it wasn't that popular. Video conferencing, deals of sizes somewhere between $5,000 and $50,000, and that using Salesforce.com. And that was pretty much it. So there's probably, I don't know how many, maybe 10,000 companies in the world of that category. Now we're obviously doing phone and email and many other things. AT&T is a customer and others. So And I think that allows us to sort of really kind of focus on the key value proposition, which is, I'm a sales organization. There's a collaboration aspect. There's a multi people to people selling. How can I get a better handle visibility into what's happening? That core message hasn't changed, but we obviously built it many more applications. So how do you coach to that? How do you manage pipeline? All of these things. But initially, it was just giving visibility into that things.
Right. So now taking, going up 30,000 feet, a little bit about, the sales world. Obviously, we also have to talk a little bit about what's happening with COVID in 2020, with how sales has dramatically changed. Obviously, Gong has become incredibly more relevant in 2020, when now literally everything is digital. But talk to me a little bit about how sales has changed, since we've introduced, digital communication, and whether we've adapted or didn't adapt properly to that.
It's a great question, and I think what COVID did is really accelerated everything by 5 to 10 years. I don't think it changed much.
Yeah.
So if you sort of like rewind 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, most B2B selling was done in person. So I would take a plane. I did this myself in the beginning of year 2000. Like hop on a plane 8 a.m., fly to the customer, go to lunch, meet a customer, go back to the hotel, sleep, meet again, fly back 2 days, one meeting, two meetings. Completely inefficient. It's gradually shifted towards digital selling. Video conferencing helped, even WebEx helped, right? Even though it's like a conference call helped, email helped. I mean, it's kind of obvious now. Everybody has an email, but 20 years ago it was, can I send big attachments, right? Many other digital tools. And I think it just increased efficiency. Now, what people have been seeing in COVID, many people were like, well, we can only close $10,000 deals. Well, guess what? In the last maybe year or so, people have been closing seven-figure deals over the phone because there's no other method. And I think once people get used to this, there's no going back in the sense that people are still going to meet, of course, hopefully, but they're not going to take a plane for 2 days just for 1 hour meeting. It's just not going to happen. Even if they wanted to, the CFO is going to look and say, hey, you can do this in like an hour, and I'm going to spend $2,000 sending you back and forth. It's just not going to happen. So I don't think that's a reversible thing. Relationships are still important. I think people are going to go back to having dinners and lunches, but not maybe 30% of the time versus 90% of the time.
Right. And so one of the things that I think are most fascinating about where you're standing today, you're the forefront of the digitalization of insight into sales. And almost, Gong as a market leader, you're dictating, how do we see, analytics in sales, and how do we interact along with sales people. Do you find that your position as chief product officer over the last while has changed as Gong is growing? And is it going to change? Are your priorities different? Do you think about different things going from where you were before to now?
I think there's two things. Tactically, when COVID started, we launched a couple of very nice COVID-centric features. Like one good example was people were becoming remote. So we created this activity calendar where teams could share their calendars and look who they're selling to. Very small feature, but turns out that in Google, you can look at somebody's calendar. But first of all, you have to sort of look at it again. And then it doesn't show you which deals they're working on. So you only see meeting. And now you sort of suddenly see the whole team, huge for like remote teams. But so that's tactically. I think strategically what's changed isn't due to COVID, just like us being, maybe 2 years ago, we were maybe 100 people. 1 year ago, 200 people. Now we're over 400 people. So just this footprint of us as a suite of products. So it's no longer just conversation intelligence. It's now revenue intelligence. It's not touching just coaching. It's touching the core pipeline management processes. Next year, we're going to do assisted selling. There's so much more we can do. It kind of broadens what my role is and the product role is in general, which is incepting new value proposition, value areas where we can pretty much become the new operating system for B2B selling in a couple of years.
But at the end of the day, it's all about resources, right? It's all about money, time, relationships. There is one chief product officer. You have 24 hours in the day, and you now have 400 people across the different divisions. Each person, reinventing different things and different ideas and different pitches. And at the end, there's one Eilon, right? And the company has to focus. So how do you continue innovating, or how do you continue prioritizing and keeping yourself in check that you truly are prioritizing the right 24 hours in the day, which I'm assuming you're working most of those hours, given that what I'm saying, Gong, is happening?
No. I don't believe in hard work, like over hard work. I think you want to run marathons, not sprints, and you can't run 100 miles per hour forever. So I think there's two things. First of all, you always want to, as a startup person, right? You always want to hire smart people, right? So I think if you hire smart people, you don't have to do that much because other people do the smart things. I think the other thing for product specific stuff, the way we organize our teams it's called squads. It's like every PM, UX, and a group of engineers kind of work together, almost their own startup. So in the same way, they're like pretty independent, right? So one is like about coaching, one is about pipeline management, one is about assisted selling. I mean, so then, as us as leadership, we don't have to interfere so much. I mean, we want to distract people from time to time, but generally they're pretty self-sufficient. And I think personally, I don't believe in this like I don't have enough time kind of thing. I mean, if I don't know if you've seen or some of the other listeners here have kind of read through, there's a nice book on getting things done. And I think the gist of what they're saying is, you got a bunch of things, whatever you can do in a couple of minutes, just knock them out, the rest just prioritize. If something that drops below the line, well, I guess it's not important, right? So there's no point in doing it. I mean, it's just not happened, but you've kind of consciously made a decision to make it number 17. And then you don't feel bad about it. You can go to sleep. You don't have to work 24 hours a day. And if it's so important, bring it to number 7. Something else is going to go down. So I don't believe in like, crazy work or like, I'm stressed. I don't feel stressed.
So I think that is perhaps the most inspiring thing that I'm taking out of this. The chief product officer of a hyper growth company that is doubling year over year, saying, I don't believe in overworking or being stressed. That we're having fun and we're working hard and what I'm hearing from you is working intelligently, right? It's not about not working hard, but it's working intelligently and very intentionally. That's what I'm.
I mean, you don't hear me saying not working hard. We work hard. At least most of us do. But first of all, when we ask employees, are you okay with kind of what we work? We generally get positive feedback. But I think also it's working hard, but reasonably hard because you don't want to burn yourself, right? So people call it a startup, but it's a marathon. It's multi-years. I've had people in Gong, by the way, who I worked with for, I'm going to say a number here, but it's going to be stunned, right? For over 20 years.
Wow.
And so, I mean, the people wouldn't want to work with me if they all like burn themselves. So it's all about like keeping those things like in health and keeping ourselves like kind of
I love it.
Inspired and I want to do this more.
I love it. Eilon, I'm already upset that we only have a few minutes left, but now I want you to talk to me and to the other young entrepreneurs and engineers that are tuning in either from, Stanford or 8200. We're all, extremely excited to go on our own paths and hopefully create the next Gong. I think that, Gong really exemplifies, the hunger that so many young entrepreneurs have, especially in 2021, especially, in the ecosystems we live in. And this is a unique opportunity for me to gauge kind of your insight. What types of things in your position would you tell young Eilon or young Michael or young Santiago who's listening? What are some things to keep in mind as we go through our journey?
I would probably, one thing is when you think about a product, just make sure you make one customer really, really happy. So don't focus like making everybody a little bit happy. Just find this one customer, make them really, really happy, and then kind of worry about the second one, make them really, really happy. And then the third one, eventually, if you make people really, really happy, they're going to bring their friends and so on. So that's like, call it focus, but it's really like customer driven. We call it raving fans. How do you make customers raving fans? But
raving fans. I love it.
It's more like make sure that you bring a lot of value. That's on the one thing. And I think on the like personal behavior kind of thing, this is my thing. You don't have to be. There's like many, excuse my French here, right? Many jerks have succeeded, right? But I think if you can be like a good person and like authentic and work with other people, I think that helps too. Probably not mandatory, right? But it's kind of nice.
No, definitely. And I think that being a mensch I've greatly enjoyed also working with Oded from J Ventures and hearing mensch all the time. It rings a bell, and I think that it's definitely something amazing. Talk to me a little bit more about this raving fans idea. Why is it better to have a small cohort of like super fans rather than a much larger cohort that says, yeah, we enjoy what they're doing. They're a good company.
First of all, especially in the beginning, there's the Jeffrey Moore thing, sort of like you want companies bring their friends, and the way they're going to bring their friends, if they're super excited. If they're kind of mildly excited, they're not going to tell the friends. They're not going to be great references. So first of all, it's a prerequisite to just being successful and growing. I think the other thing, if you're not super successful, you're always vulnerable. So right now we live in a crazy world in terms of like company valuations and startups and all what have you. There's always, downturns. And I think if you are not bringing tons of value in the first downturn, you're going to be the first thing they're going to turn off. So it's always, Amit, my partner and I both have been through the 2001 bubble bursting, 2009 bubble bursting. So I think there's also an element of like, you want to protect yourself against those situations where the market's going to collapse. You want to be one of those systems that people are going to be like, I can't live without it. Like, let me tell you, I'm not going to get rid of my dishwasher, no matter what. I'm probably going to get rid of my children before I get rid of my dishwasher. So maybe not, but you know what I'm saying, right? So it's like, you want to be one of those things that are like a must have versus like, I don't know, it's number 17, let's save some budget.
I love that. Eilon, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time. I enjoyed this episode so much. Talking about focus, talking about raving fans, talking about being a mensch, running marathons, not sprints. And at the end of the day, I have to say, speak with the humbleness and the humility that you bring to the table. I think it's inspiring, and it's inspiring me on the journey that I want to go through. And I'm sure that other people that are listening, it's just as inspiring. So thank you for all the amazing work that you're doing, both with Gong, but I'm guessing with every person that you interact with. So it was really great. And the most important question is left, which is 3 words you would use to describe yourself.
Wow, that's hard because you only told me about it like 30 minutes ago.
Exactly. That's the hardest question. I have to say, talking about not having raving fans, I used to not even warn people, which was a horrible mistake, because then people were upset with me. So now I'm getting better slowly, but I still need to warn a little bit more in advance.
Cool. So I'm gonna have to just reuse words we've used already, right? So I would say authentic is one. I'm a big believer in being authentic, being yourself. Also encourage other people around me to be authentic. Probably be self-motivated. That's 2 words. I got 3 now.
I love it. Authentic and self-motivated. Eilon, toda rabba rabba. Best of luck. I can't wait to continue being a super fan of what you're doing. I'm one of the raving fans. So thank you for all the great work, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you for hosting me today. Have a great day.